Good evening and welcome to Crawley Borough Council's Overview and Scrutiny Commission meeting of the 22nd of April. I'm Councillor Marion Ayling, Chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Commission. There are no scheduled fire drills tonight, so in the event of a fire alarm sounding, please leave the building via the main spiral staircase and through the main reception doors. Once outside, please turn left and make your way to the fire assembly point located beyond the multi-storey car park in Exchange Road. If you are unable to use the stairs, please wait in the council chamber and you will be guided by a member of staff to the evacuation lift. This meeting is being live streamed via the council's YouTube channel. The link to this is included in the agenda. Please note that there are no comment functions available as part of the webcasting. The council is the data controller and will retain the data collected during this webcast. This will be done in accordance with the council's published data retention policy. Do I read the members? Any members of the public seated in the public gallery should be aware that by the entering the chamber, they are consenting to their image being captured by the automated camera system. Recordings will be used for webcasting and or training purposes. Councillors are reminded to take note of what is displayed on the screens in the room, as this shows what is being recorded. Cameras are currently set to capture you in a seated position, so please remain seated when speaking. You can request to speak as usual in the committees by raising your hand, to speak by pressing the button with the face on it, and the microphone will go green and you will be live. We will now start the meeting with apologies of absence. Have we received any apologies of absence?
Thank you, Chair. We've received apologies from Councillor Hellier.
Thank you. Does any members have any disclosures of interest or whipping declarations? Councillor Bob Lanza.
Thank you, Chair. I declare a personal interest as a member of West Sussex County Council in items 5 and 6. Thanks.
Councillor Lunnan.
I'm not sure if I need to, but I'll declare a personal interest as I live on a road possibly impacted by introduction of parking measures at Goffs Park.
Anyone else? Okay. Minutes. Now we come to the minutes of the last meeting held on the 10th. As a reminder, these contain Part B items. Does the Commission agree that these minutes... Does the Commission agree these minutes? Do we agree them? Agreed? Lovely. Thank you. Right, there's no public in attendance, so we will move on from public question time. We're going to change the agenda order tonight, unless there are any objections. Firstly, unfortunately, Councillor Norris is unwell tonight and cannot attend the meeting. He sends his apologies and therefore the Cabinet member discussion will be deferred to another meeting. All the Crawley Homes reports will be discussed first before any other item on the agenda. This is due to the number of reports and the work being carried out in that area. There is a large agenda and please keep the questions relevant to the item. Item 5. The majority of the reports tonight are Crawley Home Policy reports. We have Councillor Irvine, a Cabinet Member for Housing, Amanda Kendall, Head of Crawley Homes, Georgina Lee, Policy and Engagement Manager, Jeff Tarran, Compliance Manager, and Mario Diondre, Operations and Maintenance Manager. We start with Crawley Homes Maintenance and Repair Policy Report. Councillor Irvine, can you please introduce the report? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, as you know, I've been here quite a few times recently, as have the Crawley Homes team, because we're putting all our policies onto paper so that everyone knows exactly where they stand on different matters. I think this particular policy is a little bit different from usual, because the policies we've brought forward in previous meetings really have just been putting onto paper things which are already done in practice. But this particular policy, while it does do that, it also marks a slight change from the way Crawley Homes has operated in the past. Because traditionally, we've always been an all-repair landlord, and now, given the pressures on the housing revenue account with repairs and the escalating costs of doing repairs, we've had a look through things which we feel could possibly be done by the tenants themselves without actually affecting their service or their tenancy in a drastic fashion. And those changes are listed at 7.4. So that's it. I mean, you would have a chance to read the report. So with that, I'll invite you to ask any questions or make any comments.
For the report, I will now open it up to questions and discussion. Do any councillors have any questions, please? Anybody? Councillor Lunnan.
Thank you, and thank you for the report. It's interesting, and it's sort of I think it's probably a slight shame that we're moving away from providing a full repair service, but I do understand also that needs must. One particular thing that I was fascinated by, and I'm always a numbers person, is that apparently we spent £60,000 on toilet seats last year, which is an astonishing figure, because I've just checked to make sure I wasn't misremembering how much a toilet seat costs, and the toilet seat from Argos, the cheapest one, just an example, is £10. So that means we've replaced 6,000 toilet seats in the last year. Now, we've got a stock, I think, of about 8,000 to 9,000, is that right, in Crawley Homes of houses? So that means roughly 2/3 of our stock has had a toilet seat replaced in the last year, and does so on a yearly basis. Now, in my house, I've not replaced a toilet seat in the last 6 years, and maybe I'm doing something wrong and I need new and fancy toilet seats. But that amount of spend on toilet seats does seem very, very high, and I just wondered if there was some thought into why that particular number was so high. That's not to say that I don't agree that, toilet seats can be replaced by tenants, the principle of it. I'm just astonished by the amount we've apparently been spending on toilet seats. So if that could be answered.
Yes, good evening. My name's Mario Dandra, Operations and Maintenance Manager. Thank you for welcoming me here today. I'd like to explain the way we have worked in the past as a systems thinking organisation was to put on the job ticket as such, or the job order. For example, the description might be toilet seat. Yes, the toilet seat was replaced, but at the same time, there will be in there other minor repairs that were required for that toilet seat. So it would be things like the cone joint at the back. It might have been a leak or a new system that's been added to it. So the description toilet seat is relevant to the way we used to work. From the 2nd of January, they've been issued independently and singly. So I think what we've done is written that incorrectly in the report.
Yeah, thank you, and that does make sense. Just to check, though, that therefore going forward, it would still only be toilet seats that would be the tenant's responsibility, and any further damage to the toilet would still fall under Crawley Homes' sort of responsibility to repair.
Yeah, that's correct. And also, just to add, it isn't just toilet seats, it's the cost of labour that goes with that. So you obviously need to consider that in addition to the cost of the toilet seats. It wouldn't actually be 6,000 toilet seats anyway. Just for clarity, because often the labour is perhaps the more expensive part anyway. But absolutely, going forward, we would still do other items that are our responsibility, but the toilet seats would be tenant responsibility if they wanted to change or upgrade.
No, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add, I mean, like Councillor Dunn, when my when I saw the figure for toilet seats, my jaw dropped slightly. So I did a bit of research, very rudimentary, on the internet, and I found that you could get a box standard toilet seat for around £20 or £30, and then, for example, in London, the regular charge for sitting in a toilet seat seems to be around about at least £100. So. So there is a bigger cost in it, but I still think that this is a saving that we can make without causing detriment to the tenants.
I do want to speak. Thank you. Thank you for the report. Very, very important. I was actually, I'm pleased that we've come to this conclusion that not so many of the all repairs landlord responsibilities have been taken away, because we've got a very proud record as a landlord going back many years, and I think we want to keep that reputation as not being better than other social landlords, but obviously better than the private sector. So I wouldn't want to, and I think it's important that we carry on with our repairs budget. I think, you repair the roof and the sun shines, and we're doing a lot of planned maintenance, etc., which is really important. But to me, if you cut too much from what we do as responsibility, it'd be like going to a restaurant and looking at the menu and cutting the menu slightly when you know the problem is actually the chef and the workmanship of the chef. So I think that's a reasonable analogy. So what my question is before we looked at all the kind of savings here, it's important consideration on 2.35 about providing value for money. In terms of our repair service, in terms of the work done by the contractors on our behalf, do you consider that A, we get value for money, and B, we have got enough systems in control in place to monitor that we're getting value for money?
So we have RQS Keegans who look at costs and report on costs every month. So when they look at the valuations each month from Waitesmears and Liberty, they will report back on trends, costs, benchmarking, etc. We have also, when we change the structure in the responsive and planned maintenance team, we've been embedding that in the last 6 months. Part of what they're also doing is or will be doing is post-inspecting works to make sure both of the quality and that the job undertaken is exactly what we've ordered. There's no follow-up work, etc. So in terms of your question, there are more things that we can do to make sure that we are getting value for money for the tenant, and that is making sure we've got a robust process of post-inspecting, but we do already have a robust process in place for benchmarking costs, etc. Other things that we want to do, we joined Housemark at the very end of last year, and there are other things that we can do there in terms of benchmarking costs, and we'll be getting into some of those kind of benchmarking things shortly. But also we have been working with a consultant on our 30-year HRA business plan, and partly what they've also been looking at is costs and whether our costs look reasonable compared to what they're seeing across the sector.
Have we got any kind of interim results on how our costs compare?
Favourably, I would say. That's what's coming out from the consultant who's looked at our 30-year plan. And obviously we get the commentary back each month from Keegan's as well. We've also done specific benchmarking around kitchens. Jeff may want to come in on that a little bit further, or Mario. We've done specific benchmarking around kind of kitchens and bathrooms to make sure we're getting good value from both contractors. So that will be Waits and Mears on that. Do either of you want to come in on that? Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Hilton. Just to confirm, so Keegan's will challenge the valuation in parts, not the whole valuation, because it's £1 million per month. But they will look at specifics, look for trends month on month to see, okay, well this stock part has risen in price, why is that? You know, they'll look for the evidence for it. So they do a robust check on the materials. And in terms of the larger planned maintenance items, They will, together, in partnership with both contractors, compare apples with apples, as it were, forgive the crude terminology, but put a basket rate, as it's known in the industry, in place. So, okay, for a kitchen, you're going to be allowed all these items, and what is your cost for it? What is your baseline cost? Negating any variations, if you need to remove a larder, so on and so forth, which would be priced separately. So there are a lot of robust mechanisms in place to ensure that we are receiving value for money. And furthermore, the principal contractors do manage the productivity, so of the direct ops, so when it's not being delivered by a subcontractor, they manage the productivity of their operatives, and will also, for their suppliers to further challenge costs, they work with national suppliers, and the organisations, Waits and Mears, the national organisations, challenge those suppliers to ensure that Crawley receives the best value for the materials that we use on this contract.
I just
What we also-
want to pick up on something that Councillor Hilton said, and something which he said that I can only agree with, which is that we could strip back what we provide as a landlord, but we have never been that type of landlord. Our tenants pay their hard-earned cash. They deserve a good service. They look to us to be a good landlord, and I would hope that we strive to be not just a good landlord, but a much better than average landlord, and because, as I say, that's what the tenants deserve.
What we also did as part of the procurement exercise was look to keep our business in Crawley. So we benchmarked a lot of organisations that supply kitchens and materials, and we actually have a current deal with Magnets, which are based literally around the corner, and we use Hughes Gray, which are based in Crawley. Yes, huge national companies, but obviously we're keeping the work within the Crawley area.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points. I'm going back to Councillor London's point about toilet seats and Councillor Hilton's point. How many of this toilet seat bill, how many have come to us as a report from the tenant that my toilet seat is broken? And how many have come across other work being done by one of our contractors and suddenly they throw in a toilet seat for free? I think is there an element of mission creep where the contractor decides, we're here now, oh look, you need a new toilet seat, or how many are actually the tenant saying I need a new toilet seat?
I would say that's quite a difficult one and a suitable challenge. Obviously, the majority of them, I would say, come through the contact centre, so they're reported as broken toilet seat. Obviously, we do look at whether items have been maliciously damaged, and from time to time they have been, and obviously we do suggest to the tenant that obviously it will be a recharge if our operative turns up. But we're an all-repairing landlord, currently an all-repairing landlord, and we do trust our operatives. So if the operative is out on the job and they've identified that the cistern is leaking, what we're not expecting them to do is to come back and ask for authority to it. For them to do it, we actually trust them. So, toilet seat, I trust them to have said it needs doing.
Okay, second point, is there any auditing of such work, a sample basis or anything like that, where we go back to the contractor saying, okay, in the last 6 months you've upgraded the work because of what you've found at the property X number of times. Let's take a random sample of these and just check that that is necessary work rather than just trusting the contractor. Is there an audit process?
Yeah, the contract was tendered on a systems thinking basis, whereby the contractors would self-certify the work that they were doing. Obviously, it was based on trust. But as Amanda mentioned earlier on, we are looking at introducing a priority system which went live at the beginning of January of this year, and obviously introducing post-inspections.
Also, just to add that the contractors are also required to upload photos of all the work they do. So if we wanted to track back and audit jobs, we can, because we would be able to look at the photos of before and after work. I don't know if some of that was done through the audit, actually, for the repairs audit. So we've had an audit from the Southern Internal Audit Partnership, SIAP. I was just trying to think what the acronym was, sorry. They've done an audit of the repairs service, and this is some of what they would have looked at, evidence for that jobs have been undertaken when the contractors have said they've been undertaken.
Thank you for that. Just to add to Amanda's point, I think it's important that it's quite an important shift that we're moving to probably greater order. That as Mario says, we have got trust in our contractors, but we're wanting to check. And I think going back to Councillor Hilton's point earlier, just about scrutiny, and we've got, as Amanda's talked about, various mechanisms internally to ensure effectively we're getting what we're paying for and we're getting a good service for tenants. But actually, there's also a function of scrutiny, which is this committee as well. And I think the kind of questions that members are asking do mean that officers will go away and look at these and make sure we're doing everything that we should be doing to get a good service for tenants and we're getting value for money. So I think there's the internal management scrutiny process, but I think this external scrutiny from members is also incredibly helpful in ensuring that we're absolutely delivering what we should be for tenants.
All the committee members have had the opportunity to speak, so I'd like to thank the officers for their interesting report. I move that Commission notes the report and request that the views expressed during the debate are fed back to the Cabinet through the Commission's comment sheet. Can I have a seconder for that? Kieran, Councillor Khan. Is that agreed? Agreed? Recommendations are agreed. Now we move on to Crawley Homes resident engagement strategy.
Thank you, Chair. Well, again, this isn't just a statement of what the council or what Crawley Homes already does. There is actually some new material in this, and it is a very important part of what we do, because we do now have to have a strategy in order to comply with housing regulation. So obviously, if we don't have such a strategy, then we're not meeting our obligations. I think engagement, I'm very interested in resident engagement, as I think most of us councillors are, because basically we are, whichever party we belong to, we do believe in democracy, listening to people and representation. So I think you can say we've got a strategy which will work at the moment, but in order to make sure that it's effective, you would have to keep looking at it as time goes by to see what works and what doesn't work. Maybe why some people want to get involved, why some people don't want to get involved. And while acknowledging that a lot of people, a lot of our tenants and leaseholders just want somewhere to live. They don't necessarily want to be part of engaging with the council over different matters. So, I'll say that this is a strategy now, but I would expect that the strategy would change over time to take into account all the different factors. And also, I think one of the most important things of all is to make sure that, as far as possible, everyone who wants to be part of something has the opportunity to be part of it. I mean, for example, take one or two of the organisations which are named. Obviously, you couldn't have every tenant in Crawley on those groups, because that would be completely unwieldy. But every tenant in Crawley, if they want to, should have the opportunity to apply to be part of it. How that works out in practice is a different matter. I don't have the answer to that, but I definitely think it's something that we need to work towards, and that might take a little bit of time. So with that, I again invite you to make any comments and questions that you might have.
Thank you for the report. I will open it up to questions and discussion. Do any councillors have any questions, please?
Yeah, thank you. I've got more of a comment than a question. I attended the Gossip Screen big neighbourhood event last summer, and I just want to put on record what a fantastic event it was, and thanks to all the officers who helped organise it. It was really important in terms of visibility and also giving residents an opportunity to engage with the service in a different way. I think we're all aware of the pressures that are facing officers at the moment, and so I hope you'll feel able to let councillors know if we can assist to a greater degree with those events in future, So, for example, we'll know residents who might have been in touch with local concerns who we can help promote the events with. Thank you.
That's lovely feedback, thank you. And absolutely, we would be inviting ward, the local ward councillor if we had an event in their area, as you well know. So, but thank you, that's great feedback.
Thank you. Again, it's more of an observation and a comment, but on two things. I mean, just generally reading through the suite of policies that have been put forward, and it's just really good to see this codification of practice. And I may have questions on individual policies later, but that's been fantastic. So thank you, and I wanted to recognise the hard work that's clearly gone into those. Secondly, as well, on a general point, the activities that the Housing Department runs, the open sessions, I just want to compliment on what I've seen and the practice that I've seen over the 2 years that I've been a councillor. The open day a year ago at Milton Mount, I think, Nick, you were at one recently at Javelin Court, which was very, very good, and it's fed back to me how good that was. And whilst it was a leaseholder event, the one last week as well, I just wanted to compliment the officers on what I'm seeing and the practice I'm seeing, so thank you. And it was a pleasure to read, as I say, the codification of the high standards that we're aiming for as a borough council with our interactions with the tenants and other people in our properties, so thank you.
Yeah, just a quick comment. These are great things. Interacting with our tenants and our residents is a very important part of being a council and being able to respond to their needs. One word of caution I would say is that there's been within my ward a residents meeting set up with the housing association that they all come under, and I attended the meeting, and it isn't what I would expect a residents meeting to be. They were talked at for an hour and a half. Questions were selected and cut very short, so I think we need to be cautious that we don't accidentally slip into bad practice. Nothing I've seen so far with Crawley Homes will suggest that will happen, but it's something we do have to be cautious about.
Yes, I'm really pleased to see this piece of work coming forward. Because tenant engagement is hugely important. I know some of the Crawley Homes events over the past couple of years, when they have been in Broadfield, I have tried my best to attend. And I have noticed that sometimes these events are a bit hit and miss. Sometimes you get loads of people and sometimes you don't get any. So I think it is hugely important that we do have a plan in place to obviously encourage residents to come along. And if there's anything we can do to promote events or anything like that, then obviously please let me know. And I have enjoyed the events I have attended over the years put on by Crawley Homes. So I'm really pleased to see this work come forward. Thank
you. I'm going to say something different in that, despite being a fellow ward councillor for Councillor Khan and Councillor Irvine, I don't think I've been invited to a single Crawley Homes event, so I'm not sure what's going on, but obviously I'm on the bad list. But if I could be invited, that'd be nice to see all the excellent work that's going on. I did actually have a couple of quick questions on the actual policy itself. I know a lot of good work is already going on, especially with the TLAP. Just regarding the management board, I was intrigued to know why the cabinet member wasn't a member of that board, because I'd have thought it would make sense for them to be so. And then secondly, there's no mention here in the policy, and I think this was one of the outcomes of the scrutiny panel on social housing, that we did specifically on housing associations, but we knew that this engagement surveys were being mandated and going to be coming back, and there's no mention in this survey of how, I think what we said at the time was what we wanted was for Crawley Homes to feed into OSC the results of the engagement survey, just so we could see what was going on and make sure, apply some scrutiny to it, but there's no mention of that in the policy, so I wondered if that was still being considered or whether that had been excluded for a specific reason.
Are you referring to the tenant satisfaction measures survey?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that came last year. We had an all-member seminar where we shared that, and it also came via Cabinet. but we only just finished the second tranche of 24-25, so the results for the whole year will be coming out shortly. So they are imminent. Did you want to come back on that point?
Yeah, I'm not after the specific results. What I'm after is the mention of them in this policy as to how we engage with residents, because obviously that's a key way that we engage with residents and how they're fed back into this council. So the fact that we get the results and then that they're fed into OSC through a separate seminar or something like that isn't mentioned in this policy. So I just thought maybe it should be, because that's obviously a part of resident engagement.
Yeah, just to clarify, so the tenant satisfaction measures result is in the survey section there, but just to be clear, you want a reference made in the resident engagement strategy about where it goes, where the results go from then in terms of OSC.
In the fact that there's some council oversight of that engagement.
If that's missing, I can make that amendment before.
Yeah, it's not to change what you already do, it's just to make reference to what you do.
Yeah, I think it's very helpful for tenants to know that too, that it has that oversight and scrutiny. So I should make sure we make that amendment. Thank you.
Yeah. And then there's just the point on the board.
And the Regulatory Compliance Board. So we did a gap analysis against what we were delivering versus the consumer standards, and came up with a number of work streams, quite a lot in fact, probably about 100. And we sat down with residents to prioritise those. So, I mean, look, point taken about Councillor Irvine being on the board, but we sat down with residents, the TLAP chair and vice chair specifically, to work out what the board looked like. And I think we were slightly concerned that if it had a political element, the board, maybe how residents might feel about that, because we very much wanted it to kind of be resident-led in terms of the kind of prioritisation piece, because these are pieces and strands of work that affect residents. But, we can review that if members feel that that's important.
I can see Councillor Irvine has indicated, so I'm interested to hear his opinion.
Well, can I start with the easy stuff? Which is to say, thank you to everybody for your questions and comments. And I thought it was a very interesting contrast between the estate days, I don't know if I call them estate days, neighbourhood days, in Gossip's Green and Broadfield. And yes, Gossip's Green was a very successful one. I went to that day, and it was very, very good. And so for Councillor Lunn, I think there's only actually been one neighbourhood day in Broadfield, and regrettably, that wasn't very well attended. And that's an indication of how somehow we have to work harder at making sure that people want to be involved or can be involved through other means rather than sort of formal events. I mean, I think we did consider a paper about this at the OSC a couple of years ago. The point about the compliance board, well, yeah, I mean, it's not a matter of Councillor Irvine not being on the board, it's a matter of a cabinet member of housing not being on the board, because that could change. I mean, I go to enough meetings now, so I'd be quite happy to go to another one. And, I mean, well, it's a difficult point to... I think it's something we'll take away and look at. I can't say we should say right now that will happen, or say it won't happen, because we don't come here just to receive your questions and then shut them down. We do actually want to listen to what you have to say, because you have been elected to say useful things. So we'll take that away. I'm not averse at all to the idea of a councillor being on that board. I don't think it would make it political. I think it's just we are representatives, and therefore we have to represent people at every level we can. Thank you.
Can I just make the point as well that we have a lot of other internal governance board that members don't sit on, so why would this be any different? I think is the point, but we can certainly take it away for review.
I think it's different. I don't know if you were going to come back on that. I think it's different because the chair and the vice chair of TLAP is involved, and it's not about councillors having a political sway. I just think it goes back to what is a TLAP? Is it easy for me to say, Regulatory Compliance Board? Is it a non-executive function or is it an executive function? Because to me, it looked like it's something we've got to put in because of the regulations. But if the TLAP are on there and the councillors on there as well, kind of strengthens that non-executive function. So I wasn't whether it's political or not. I didn't see it as, I wasn't sure what role it had, whether executive or non-executive. That's the issue I had, really.
So it's actually not a requirement of the regulator for us to have this board at all. It was something that we felt that we wanted to bring forward with residents to prioritise some of the gaps that we'd found. It would be a non-executive board. It's not a decision-making board. It is merely to look at how we prioritise our work. And bearing in mind, the key piece of the regulation is about listening to tenants, making sure they're at the centre of what we do. Therefore, that's why this is a co-production piece with residents in terms of focusing on priorities and therefore not the kind of the political priority. Yeah.
I just want to say, Chair, that in carrying out my duties as Cabinet Member for Housing, I do strive to be not party political, but clearly we've got to take this one, have another look at it and do a bit more work on it. So I think that's probably best to leave it there, really.
Yes, if I may, I just wanted to come back on a couple of points. Councillor Pritchard, apologies if it wasn't you, mentioned about having attended tenant events for housing associations and feeling that tenants were very much sort of talked at. Just wanted to explain that when we do a significant conference or event, we always do a feedback form and we ask questions around having had ample opportunity to contribute, having been listened to, and for the feedback we had from our recent maintenance and repairs feedback event and the tenants conference all very much sort of echoed that people felt they very much had an opportunity to say their piece, to raise new ideas. The tenant conference itself, there were several workshops, so people broke down into smaller groups and there was sort of very engaging, lively discussions. So we do our absolute utmost to make it not a case of having a presentation, talking to people, sending everybody home. We always invite other business and we always open questions up to the floor and we offer the opportunity to raise whatever people want to. So just wanted to just to let you know how we do those. As regards the big neighbourhood days, I think it's fabulous to hear the feedback we've had, but I think something to remember is that the days themselves, the attendance at the days is really important and really valuable because there's lots of other providers there to work with us and to get feedback. But they are also accompanied by a door knock in the area, so at Gossips Green and at Forgewood. The Broadfield Day was before my time, but that involved a door knock of everybody who lives in the area, leaving paper surveys behind for people who weren't able to answer the door. And so we do sort of go to quite a great length in terms of organising the ability to reach everybody that we possibly can in that area. And just the last point on that really, because I know we need to move on. Two more points actually. We've got a new communications plan that we've started putting together that will have newsletters throughout the year, and those will predict and notify early about the different events that we're having, and then there'll also be reminders closer to the time. So the intention is that, for example, we'll be telling people about the tenants conference in September, we'll be talking to residents about that in July, and building campaigns around each of these events as they happen. And yeah, the other thing to remember, I think the strategy very much emphasises the need to be able to reach out to tenants to engage in whatever way they please. So it may well be that people don't want to come to a big event or can't come to a big event, but I do hope that you'll be reassured that the strategy has options really, whether people don't want to be involved at all, right through to sort of whether they want to be involved at the highest levels. Thank you.
You want to come far earlier, so I apologise. Can I just say I thought it was a really, really good report. And after my experience at Wakeham's Green and Milton Mount in the last 2 weeks, I can see how hard you work and what a challenge. And it is not one size fits all. It's all very different. And I think it was really good. And I just recommend everyone to look at the tenant engagement on Crawley Gov on the link on page 144, because that shows all the coming events and there's some really good stuff coming on. So I thought it was really worthwhile for ward councillors to be invited and go along. So thank you for all your efforts on it.
Thank you. Just to say, we'll make sure that everybody is invited to the things we have going forwards.
Report. I move that the Commission notes the report and requests that the views expressed during the debate are fed back to the Cabinet through the Commission's comment sheet. Please can I have a seconder? Anyone second it? Right. Justin? Sorry, Councillor Russell? And Councillor Hilton? Oh no, I'll get you next time. Right, is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Recommendations are agreed. We move on to Crawley Homes Hate Incident and Crime Policy. Councillor Irving, will you please introduce the report?
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is, I mean, if you've read this, you'll know this is quite a lengthy document, and strictly speaking, it doesn't actually fall as part of my ASB, antisocial behaviour, it doesn't fall as part of my portfolio, but I'm happy to introduce it. I mean, I'm a lay person, as I always say. I've read the policy. I can't see any omissions or anything that needs to be added. It seems to me to be very common sense and straightforward piece of work. However, other people might have comments they wish to make, so we'd be happy to hear them. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to make one point, that although this is a Crawley Homes policy, it's a tenure neutral policy, so it doesn't just affect tenants. It is for the same as the ASB service. The ASB service is for every resident. This applies the same, although it's coming through as a Crawley Homes policy. There's a specific requirement around the consumer standards to have policies specifically around ASB, hate crimes, etc. But as I say, just for noting, this is a tenure neutral policy.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. I just had a question on paragraph 3, the legal context, and I wondered if there were a couple of other pieces of legislation that could reasonably be included in the legal context. And one is the Malicious Communications Act. I'm not sure if that's 97 or 99. I think it's one of those. And the other is the Protection from Harassment or Prevention of Harassment Act 2012, which is, I think, possibly both of those pieces of legislation could be pertinent to a hate crime and incident policy.
Thank you, Councillor. We'll take that away.
All committee members have had the opportunity to speak, so I'd like to thank the officers for their report. I move that Commission notes the report and request the views expressed during the debate are fed back to the Cabinet through the Commission's comment sheet. Do I have a seconder? Nick? No. Nick Hilton. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. The recommendations are agreed. We now move on to Crawley Homes Damp and Mould Policy. Councillor Irving to introduce the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Well, as you and any other councillor, and probably anyone involved in local government knows, especially housing, damp and mould over the last few years has been almost at the forefront of social housing for a variety of reasons. One of the reasons is, of course, the tragedy of the little child who died in a housing association flat, I think it was, in Rochdale, and the coroner put the cause of that down to dampness in the property. And since then, that's quite rightly, people have been concerned that damp and mould are dangerous to health, and that no one should have to put up with it. We are proactive in trying to eliminate these two, for want of a better word, evils. This is our policy which sets out how we're going to do it, and makes what we're trying to do accessible to tenants, so they know exactly what to do if they do experience damp and mould in their property. And with that, I'll throw it open to any questions.
Right. Thank you for the report. I'll now open it up to questions and discussion. Thank you. Do any councillors have any questions? Councillor Lunnan.
Try again. Sorry. Thank you, Councillor Irvine and officers, for this report. And I share Councillor Irvine's sort of comments on the fact that this has obviously become a very national issue due to the instance where a young child did lose their life due to damp and mould, according to the coroner. What I wanted to know relating to this was how long has this document or the intent of this document already been Crawley Homes policy, or have we, due to what's been happening nationally, have we changed our policies to be more proactive? I'm not saying we weren't proactive before, but have we been more proactive to try and make sure we are completely on top of it? And secondly, there's no mention here, but is there a financial impact from being very proactive on this topic? And if so, roughly what might that be? Just, if we are doing more repairs more frequently, that will obviously have a cost, and it's not commented on here. So I just wondered if you could comment on a broad scale without any particular detail on that.
Thank you, Councillor Lunnan. I'll pass over to Mario in a minute, who does have some details on costs. We came prepared on that one. But just on the first thing about being proactive, obviously, when it did hit the news about the sad death of our Bishak, we did a lot of proactive work around that time. We pulled off reports showing any tenant who had reported damp and mould in the previous years, and we proactively phoned them. Each officer took a number of calls, and then we had a dedicated kind of admin person that came in who was proactively contacting people saying, you reported damp and mould in the last few years, is it still a problem, do you need more work? We've done some proactive campaigns around damp and mould. So for example, as part of Gas Safety Week, in the period following the death of Awa Bishak and the coroner's decision, we coincided with a damp and mould campaign around Gas Safety Week. We have other literature that goes out. We put in place task teams. So it was kind of multifaceted group of officers who were looking at issues. So if we couldn't identify what a problem, or there was a complex problem, we'd have a surveyor, we'd have a housing officer, we might have a financial inclusion officer working with somebody, because sometimes it might be because a family cannot heat a home that's causing damp and mould. So we would work with them to kind of help establish a budget so that they could effectively heat their home. Sometimes it might be due to overcrowding. There's obviously lots of complex reasons why there might be damp and mould in a property, including structural. So lots and lots of proactive work going on. You'll also know that we're in the process of our Project Paramount, so implementing our single housing management system for the division, and we are currently working on a damp and mould case flow through that will help as well, kind of direct officers automatically to the right process to follow depending on the severity of what's being reported. I'm going to hand over to Mario, who's going to talk to you a bit about the number of jobs that we've had come through and the cost in the last year.
Okay, just to answer your other question about that, our policy is just really rubber stamping what we already did pretty much. There are some other items that we've added in there for staff guidance as well. Financially, it actually has cost us over 220,000 in the last financial year, and that can be anything from just providing some advice, doing some anti-mould treatments, or actually having to decant a tenant because the property has been really affected by the damp and mould in the property. We raised, it was around about 1,150 orders, but Crawley has always, all the time that I've been here, has been really supportive to his residents, even down to the fact that we've offer guidance, thermostats that people can obviously maintain or monitor the heat within their home. We've got an ecosystem that we can install into properties whereby tenants aren't quite sure how to manage their own home. So the relative humidity, it records that sort of thing. So we can then go back and offer some advice. We have pamphlets, leaflets. We also have DVDs that obviously have become not so popular now, but we use a Mr. Mouldy guidance booklet, which is a sort of comical thing. And some properties you just go in and have to give advice. You're not actually carrying out any repairs at all, but you are offering advice.
Yeah, just say thank you for the excellent answers. It sounds like a lot of good work's been done, and hopefully it will continue to be done, but thank you for all the detailed answers you've given.
Thank you, Councillor London. One of the other things as well, we have used the Household Support Fund to target resources. That includes using money from that fund for things like dehumidifiers and window vacs to help kind of control moisture and help kind of remove condensation from windows as well. Mario also mentioned decants, and one of the things that the Housing Ombudsman said on their spotlight on damp and mould after the death of Awa Bishak was around seriously considering if a problem was that bad around decanting somebody, and we absolutely do. That is part of our flow. We have decanted people as well. So we will go to you know, there are lots of remedies and support that we can offer people, but you know, if it comes to moving somebody, if it's temporary or permanently, we will also consider that, and we have.
Thank you. And again, to echo what Councillor Lunnan said on the comprehensive answers, I did note on page 190 3.4 that it is the joint responsibility of the tenant and the council to work together. And it's, you can't look after your own property if you don't know exactly what's going on. So in the dynamics of it, most of us are not experts on mould, so it was just really pleasing to hear all the information and work you do to help inform, as you say, albeit in sometimes comedic ways, but that's absolutely critical. So again, it was nice to see that in there, but it's also nice to hear it echoed in the actual practice, that you're making sure that information is available so they can manage their properties themselves. So thank you.
And can I just add, Chair, that I do receive regular briefings at my briefing meetings on and kept up to date with what's happening with this issue in Crawley Homes. Okay, so if anyone's got any concerns at all, any time, just feed them back to me. And okay, thank you.
Glasses on as well. All committee members have had the opportunity to speak, so I'd like to thank the officers for their report. I move that the Commission notes the report and requests the views expressed during the debate be fed back to Cabinet through the Commission's comment sheet. Please can I have a seconder for this? Yep, thank you, Councillor Lunnan. Is that agreed? Agreed. The recommendations are agreed. We now move on to Crawley Homes compliance policy report. Councillor Irvine, can you please introduce the report? Thank you.
This is the asbestos management and water safety, I believe. From my point of view, I've not got a great deal to say on this. Obviously, this is existing Crawley Homes policy, which is now being put down on paper, so everyone knows what's what. But I think that there is technical information around asbestos and water safety, which is probably better answered by the officers themselves. So I'm happy to see this policy, but as usual, also happy to receive any comments or questions.
I will now open up to questions and discussion. Do any councillors have any questions, please? Councillor Hilton.
Thank you, Chair. I think asbestos is around us, but until you move it and dislodge it in any way, it's not really an issue. And I think going on to the last topic, we have got quite an ageing stock at different ages. So I think we have to take that consideration both on damp and mould and this kind of policy as well. I've only got one really small point. And I was really impressed, actually, on 4.4. We currently hold asbestos survey data on approximately 100% of our domestic properties. To be a bit facetious, it's either 100% or it's approximately. Is it 100% or is it not 100%? I'm impressed that we know on our whole database so we know exactly what's going on in our properties, because if something does happen, and I know we were discussing it last week at a tenants meeting somewhere, so I know how important it is.
Thank you for your highlighting the contradictory statement in 4.4, because I mean we do absolutely we do hold asbestos data on 100% of our relevant properties, and we should update the policy to reflect this.
Yeah, I'm just going to channel my inner Richard Barrett and highlight that in 17.7 you haven't put the date, you just put XXX. Sorry, and then there was another one I wanted to highlight earlier, so I'm sorry for this as well. In the resident engagement survey on what is involved, how much time do I have, on page 143, I think there's supposed to be some images, but they're called icon commitment measure bars. You sound like you know about that one, or you look like you know about that, just to highlight some typos that need correct. I'm sure there are more. I haven't really gone through it the question.
Yeah, just to answer, we originally had clock faces in there with the amount of time, and then we perceive that could be a bit discriminatory, not taking account of neurodiversity and how long people take. So it's going to have some time icon bars. But once agreed, the strategy is going to go for formatting with the comms team. So they're going to put the icons in there. So they, at this stage, they're a deliberate omission, but they are going to be formatted into a sort of visual idea of how long something's going to take or what level of commitment it takes.
And in terms of 17.7, if the policy is ratified, once ratified, that date would then go 3 years hence from the month of ratification. Thank you, Councillor Lunnan.
I just want to say, Chair, that as coming from housing, I'm very pleased that our scrutineers are doing their scrutiny. And yeah, it's very, I mean, to be honest with you, I find these discussions incredibly useful. So thank you, everybody, for your contributions tonight.
Try again. All committee members have had the opportunity to speak, so I would like to thank the officers for their interesting report. I move that the Commission notes the report and requests that views expressed during the debate are fed back to Cabinet through the Commission comment sheet. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Khan. Kieran. Is that agreed? Yeah, agreed. Agreed. The recommendations are agreed. I would like to thank Councillor Irvine and all the officers for attending and presenting all the reports tonight. Thank you very much. Right. We will now consider off-street parking provision. Report from Councillor Jones, Leader of the Council, Chris Page, Deputy Chief Executive, and Dan Carberry, Public Protection and Enforcement Manager. Councillor Jones, would you like to introduce the report, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As members know, full council has approved our financial strategy going forwards, which anticipates raising an additional £388,000 per annum from the council's off-street parking arrangements. Now, this strategy sets out the framework for how we will achieve that through a fairer, more intelligent and more sustainable approach to managing our parking estate. This strategy is not, however, Madam Chair, a blunt charging strategy. The golden thread that runs through this strategy is that we want to address issues in our car parks to ensure that they're being used for the purposes that they were provided. And while we will discuss specific examples later in the meeting, it is worth mentioning now that, for example, Goffs Park is a prime example of where this is not happening. This is a site-by-site, purpose-led strategy, and what makes Crawley's approach different is the depth of analysis, the level of social and environmental consideration, and the willingness to pause or delay action where community impacts outweigh the financial case. The Cabinet have entirely ruled out charging at any of our neighbourhood parade car parks, a decision which I hope members here will agree with. These are small community-facing sites. that support local shops, GPs and community centres, using the principles outlined in the strategy. Socially, the impacts on vulnerable users, local traders and short-term convenience parking would have been significant. So that's been ruled out, and that's a direct result of this strategy's commitment to balancing cost recovery with social equity. Some councils, indeed a neighbouring authority, has increased parking charges by over 30% in 25-26. There are other examples not much further afield where the tariffs set have been even more severe. But Crawley has chosen a different path. We're taking time to understand each site, each community and the knock-on effects of any intervention. It's important to stress, Madam Chairman, that parking is not just about income. It's about how we shape movement, we support inclusion, and we ensure that those with the greatest needs, those with mobility issues, families without driveways, shift workers, older residents, can still access what they need. This is also a strategy that's grounded in legislation, primarily the Road Traffic Regulation Act 1984, and I can assure members that every proposed change will be subject to statutory consultation and democratic oversight. We've already seen the building blocks of this strategy in action in previous forms. Kingsgate Car Park has become a live example of how pricing can be used by this council strategically, not to increase cost, but to improve turnover and support footfall. We've doubled income there over the last year without increasing tariffs, just by charging more intelligently, and we'd like to use that best practice usefully elsewhere. Just some closing remarks, and Madam Chair, this strategy gives us the tools to take control of our parking estate in a way that is smart, lawful and socially responsible. It's not about applying charges indiscriminately. It's about using the data that we have, our policy, and our local knowledge to improving outcomes for residents, for businesses, and for the long-term resilience of our services that we provide. So I hope that gives the committee confidence in the robustness of the methodology and the care we are taking to balance financial goals with community needs. Of course, I welcome any questions, but as I'm stepping into the breach, I may look to my right a little more often than I otherwise may have. Thank you.
I will now open up for questions and discussion. Do any councillors have any questions, please? Councillor Lanza.
Thank you, Chair, and thank the leader and officers for this report. I've seen a good many car parking strategy and, if you like, tactic reports over the years, and I've got to observe this is the best one I've seen. I just wanted you to know that, yeah, in terms of its depth of reasoning, and it's a very considered piece of work, looking at many dimensions and activities that parking can affect. And I like the way that the volume over value experiment has been successfully implemented at the Kingsgate car park, whereby we didn't just ramp up the charges, we increased income while actually making the charges more competitive. So in a general sense, in a two-tier local government system like ours, the upper tier authority of the county has responsibility for on-street parking, and the district and boroughs have responsibility for off-street. But there are exceptions to that. I won't bore you with them, but there's a few of them. But I just had a few questions alongside that, and one relating to the Orchard Street surface and multi-storey car parks. In parts of the report, it stresses that the Orchard Street multi-storey is more secure than the surface, but in other parts of the report, it notes incidents where there's had to be interventions at the Orchard Street multi-storey. So I think we're kind of speaking with two positions almost in two different parts of the report. So we need to take care about that, especially with the comment that's also made that we're getting under usage of Orchard Street multi-storey, which we should seek to remedy, despite it feeling safer. Now, one of the considerations that the report has that people apply when considering where to park is their safety and their security. But I remember a past leader of the council made the observation there's another consideration, which is that when it comes to a choice between surface and multi-storey, some drivers will prefer the surface for the simple reason that they can see their vehicle more often, you know, as compared to it being hidden in a multi-storey. That is also a motivating factor for some people. I just mention it as a consideration. I take the point that we're not engaged in an exercise of charging for the sake of it, but we might get some criticism around budgets. There's a number of our car parks, it's noted, we have no maintenance budget at all. Now, sometimes when we don't have a budget for something, and I'm not advocating a magic money tree, but we create a budget line and not necessarily from the user. There's a remark in the report about trying to get some traffic regulation orders in place for enforcement action on disabled bays, which I consider is very important. But the report seems to imply that we will be doing this in some locations, for example, where charging isn't introduced. But I suppose my question is, why wouldn't we embark gradually on having a TRO everywhere that we have disabled bays? I would have thought. Just to comment on the technology side, if we're going to introduce more ticket machines, I think there's a couple of areas that we need to be careful about. One is that I'm sure we've all encountered this, depending on the weather, and especially on a bright spring day and summer day, depending on where those machines are located, you sometimes can't read the instructions. And it seems such a basic point about enabling the user, the customer, to actually read the instructions, whether it be by shading or some other mechanism. I mean, let's please do it. It's enormously frustrating. And also on the technology front, with local government reorganisation, some of the responsibilities will go to the new unitaries, won't they? And so I just think when we're searching for technological solutions, let's have in mind what some of the neighbouring authorities already have in place, just as a preparation for that. There's another question as well. I declared an interest earlier because of West Sussex being responsible for on-street parking. If we proceed with the introduction of charging at these locations and some of the other recommendations in the report, how conscious are we of the need to maintain an appropriate balance of enforcement between off-street and on-street? And I appreciate, and it comes across in the report quite well, that we don't want to be incentivising our civil parking enforcement team to go out there and get penalty charge notices in place. But in an on-street parking context, briefly, and I mention this because the team deals with both on-street and off-street, there's a public safety issue at some of our schools, you know, in the morning at drop-off time and pick-up time, where there is a blatant disregard on the part of a minority of parents and guardians for the safety of the children in terms of... And in those circumstances, I wouldn't feel shy about issuing PCNs, parking contravention notices. And I don't think we should, as an organisation, feel shy about doing that in the interests of public safety. That's different from the main thrust of this report, I must say, though, on the off-street point. I wonder about the public consultation timeframe. I mean, we're coming towards the end of April now, and we've got a couple of bank holidays in May. And we're told June 2025 is the end date of the consultation. I suppose it depends on when it is in June, but if it's early June, that's not a huge consultation period for this strategy. In terms of the location, I think the Goss Park Lower car park is a fine example of where an intervention is needed. It might be a bit of a shocker to start it off at £3. I'm not sure, maybe slightly less. I'm not going to die in a ditch over it. I was a little bit surprised at the average income level in the catchment area of that Goss Park lower part. I'm not disputing it, but I was a little bit surprised by that. At the Horth, there's kind of this interesting dynamic there. I mean, it's a huge cultural and very popular attraction, but it's just worth bearing in mind when we have a charging strategy. If we have a charging strategy at the Horth, I mean, just think about the cost of a night out in respect of our relationship with the operator and our relationship with our public. I mean, some of the shows they're quite premium price. And then on top of that, you have quite a decent price for a pre-show meal. And then if you start adding too much to that, it's just something to be aware of. K2 Crawley has been a kind of perennial problem ever since it was built in terms of parking capacity. It was always built with an under capacity. And I think the report's right, we should be exploring overflow options and charging again. But it's also the case with both the Horth and K2, and I think it's in the report, that there needs to be not just basic charging, but also a allowance for other attendances that you wouldn't charge for. For example, GP referral health programs into K2, that kind of thing as an example, and certain events that are held at the Horth in daytime, conferences that might extend for more than 4 hours. So there needs to be mechanisms, and again it comes down to technology, to continue to maximise the use of our core facilities of K2 and the Horth while having an appropriate charging regime. Sorry if that's a bit long, but I just thought so. Thank you.
I didn't want to interrupt Councillor Lanza's flow, but if you'll forgive me, the specific examples of locations I'll cover in item 7, if that's okay. But I'll take your point. Item 6, I suppose, is the general principle of it. But we will definitely dig into the details soon, Bob, I promise. In terms of for example, you mentioned Orchard Street and multi-storey. I take the point there's some untapped potential there. Councillor Lanza also mentions the maintenance budget, and that has been a problem for some time. And that's because people's expectations have changed. But in some areas, they definitely still want it for free. But what residents increasingly expect from our car parks is a service. They want facilities that are well maintained, well lit, that are accessible, secure, and increasingly digitally enabled. And they want bays that are usable for modern vehicles, options for electric charging, safer layouts for pedestrians and disabled users, and fair enforcement to protect availability. Now, that's something I agree with, but that all comes with a cost, and recognises that having a high quality parking provision is a service, and it's something that possibly was less of an issue for the council in the past. But for example, we had an example with the Broadfield Barton car park where it needed some significant repair work, and there wasn't immediately a pot of gold allocated to pay for that. And so obviously the council will do what's necessary to maintain standards, but I think we have a challenge as a council in that there isn't necessarily an allocated budget, and I think hopefully if we are able to raise additional revenue, then that this could be something that will mean there's less issues in the future. Now, I absolutely agree with you as well. I support enforceable disabled bays. Everywhere we've got them, it seems a nonsense that we could have some that aren't. I mean, I think I can reassure that there are plenty out there that are enforceable, but without identifying particular ones, there are a handful which that still need an order. And as Bob will know with his county councillor hat on, the wheels on that don't necessarily run that rapidly. So it is on our radar. And I think things to do with the time frame on the public consultation and the balance of off-street on-street enforcement, I think are better for Dan to answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, so the public consultation is set by statute. So it has to be for that time frame. I think the reassurance that I can give you is that the sites themselves will be plastered in adverts for that consultation, so it's as visible as it possibly can be. There'll be notices in the Crawley Observer. There will be notification on all of our social media channels, so we will get it out as far and wide as we possibly can. We quite often receive quite a high volume of responses for parking consultations, so our residents know when it's coming and they know what to do in order of letting us know what their thoughts are on those. But also with you're right on our role enforcing on street on behalf of West Sussex County Council, and you know, all of this is in partnership with the County Council. And I just wanted to, on your point about LGR, absolutely that's been factored in. So any of the technology that we're looking at is similarly used by both West Sussex County Council and all of the districts and boroughs, but equally it's used by Reigate and Banstead as well.
We've covered all at angles, Bob.
Thank you, and thank you for the report. I guess there's a couple of specific questions. It is a very good report that covers off most of the things. Talking about ANPR specifically, we talk about how it sort of can lead to issues leaving a car park, which I've definitely experienced. But I wondered whether, I've certainly seen it in other privately provided car parks, where they don't try and prevent you leaving at all. You just sort of sort out your payment after the event, and you don't prevent somebody from leaving. So that issue might be mitigated. So, and obviously the benefit of ANPR is that we then don't need to go and enforce it in any particular way. It takes care of itself, which one would assume would be more efficient and therefore more beneficial in raising revenue, which is obviously one of the aims of our parking strategy, whether we like it or not. And secondly, I felt there was it's sort of hinted towards it, but not properly, about cycle parking, especially when it comes to some of the K2, the Horth, and also our parks. Actually, some of the cycle parking for those is not ideal. And if we're introducing parking charges, we should fully make sure that alternative sort of cheaper and or indeed bus routes are available to residents who don't want to park there and want to try and do some form of active travel, and we make sure that is an option. And I didn't think we properly stated in the cases we were examining what the bike parking, for example, was like in those cases, just when we went down to them in detail in the item, not talking about item 7, I'm just talking about this one in item 5. We didn't talk specifically about what the bike parking was available to people. So just specifically on those two. But otherwise a good report, thank you.
I think there's a few technical points I'll pass to Dan, but I think the major point on the ANPR, apart from the fact that it has proved not to be a magic wand in all circumstances, is that one of the disadvantages we have is that Eric Pickles stopped councils from being able to utilise this technology in the way that private companies are allowed to. Now, so the theory goes, we could hand it all over to a private company to run, but then we would lose significant control over our car parks. And I might not have described that very well, but that's the answer.
Yeah, as Councillor Jones said, we are not allowed to enforce via camera. So an officer physically has to witness that vehicle if they work for a local authority. And it's because the legislation that is used to issue the notice is slightly different if you are a private landowner. And that was a decision taken, I think, in 2010, which outlawed CCTV as an enforcement tool for parking offences. Which is difficult for us, but I think the bigger challenge that we have is that the ANPR system at times struggles to read non-standard number plates or dirty number plates, and once you get one car in that queue that can't be read, you then end up with 10 cars behind it, particularly around 5 p.m. in the town hall. So ANPR can be great, Unfortunately for councils, it's problematic, and indeed another West Sussex authority is also removing all of their ANPR for exactly the same reasons. On cycle storage, absolutely, in the report and the strategy, it talks about our multi-storey car parks and looking at secure cycle storage. But we know, particularly at K2, that secure cycle storage is an issue, and that needs further consideration outside of the parking strategy. So there's community safety impacts and CCTV impacts on that, and it will be exactly the same for Goffs Park as well.
That's my microphone.
Sorry. I got excited then. Thank you. I just wonder when you first started writing this report, I presume you started writing this, that you probably didn't realise it was going to be as long as it was going to be, because it's a very detailed and it covers most angles. So I congratulate you on the report. I think it's one of the most detailed things I've seen since I've come back on, and I think it's really good. And I do really like the volume over value approach, because we've seen in regional councils in the region where actually they're now going back from seeing parking as a revenue generator to actually balancing between the cost and needs of possessions and stuff. And I thought it was quite interesting that you mentioned that I asked a question about business rates. I don't know if you got that on what counts as a business rate car park. And yeah, that's a good example of volume over value, because if you want to get our money back on business rates, you start charging. And I think those two, they're very different parts of town, but very similar in a lot of ways, because they're two very large areas with pockets of deprivation in both. So I think that's really good. And actually, coming on what Councillor Lands has said about parking enforcement, I think that should be reported. Of having stood outside a particular school in my ward with a county councillor colleague of yours, who Councillor London mentioned earlier, and I got a mouthload of abuse, and I had a PCO standing next to me. I think it's scarred me for life. So I do think, particularly in terms of the parades, it's not a weakness report, but all the parades, high turnover, high volume. I'm not sure I told the whole story about those parades, because there's two particular parades I use next to the one I represent. So I won't say where they are, but they are particularly busy, and I just wondered if people were not using them in the way they should be using them. So I personally would like to see some kind of blitzing of particular areas in terms of not only disabled parking spaces, but other overstays, because there are signs up, and I hope in some of those parades we can actually enforce it, because yes, it will be parking enforcement, and actually we will get some revenue back as well, which is all part of this. It's getting that balance, and I think we've got a balance about right. And I was a bit surprised to see about the TROs. The report only suggested the only parade with TROs Northgate, and I'm sure that can't be right. But I would like to focus on that in terms of enforcement of the parades, and just two other issues. I was pleased to see, but I didn't really know much about the Fisherman's car park, because I normally use the main car park and spend about 5 minutes trying to go around there. But I actually had to use the Fisherman's car park 2 weeks, and I was really pleased on a Sunday afternoon with parking officers enforcing it. So I think, particularly in Shilgate, where it's really when you walk around the park and you think, God, that's really good, that landscape there, because they've done a bit of weeding and stuff around it. And that's because of the parking revenue partly. So I think if we can show parking revenue to be a social thing, put with something back in the community, I think people will be quite happy about it. And finally, the times, it's not so much now, but I'm pretty hopeless on parking. I'm very lucky that I've got a wife who seems to have every single app under the sun. So when I now go out, I seem to be very lucky, and we can use the parking app. But for people of a certain age and disposition, parking can be really frustrating. So I don't know what we can do about that, but I'm glad that was in the equality and impact assessment, and I think it's something, as Councillor Lanza said about not being able to look at it because of sunlight, we should take in consideration of how we do that. I don't know, but certainly I do like the volume over value, and I'm just thinking off the top of my head, there was one local authority I used to use quite a lot in West Sussex, whose parking rates were really low, and I think it worked a treat. Okay, and that's it. I think, Councillor Lund.
The new Chris Mullins.
I asked some of these questions earlier as well, as you know, written, yeah, which I thought was important.
Councillor, just on your point on business rates, there's a number of things that are evaluated. So the valuation office look at usage level, what the income generation potential for that site could be, the location, the type of site, the size and number of spaces, the quality of the facilities and the restrictions. The key thing for us on the two that we the two surface car parks that are shopping parades that incur business rates is simply the size of the car park. So that's Broadfield and Maiden Bower. On Northgate, it's partially owned by West Sussex County Council, and it was decided that the car park was being significantly misused by residents as a residential car park, which is why the 2-hour maximum stay is in there. As part of the strategy, and it outlines the methodology, we have done initial looking at all shopping parades, but most of them are so small that the council would never reasonably recover the cost of enforcing in that site. So it would cost the council more money, and there's no evidence and certainly no complaints that are coming through to the parking service that any of those shopping parades are unusable because they're being blocked by people misusing those spaces. I encourage any ward members to flag those concerns so that any site can be reconsidered using the principles of the parking strategy.
Yeah, sorry, just a couple of points I forgot. Firstly, we talk about one of the things that was mentioned in the report but not really detailed, and it is something that's becoming a more common problem, is size of spaces. Like, cars are unfortunately getting bigger. I think that's a sort of a well-established fact now. And sometimes you'll see a space and think, oh, I can get in that, and then you'll find there's 2 mega cars either side of it, and it's not really possible. Some private car parks actually sort of delineate space in between the spaces to give a better customer experience, for want of a better term. Is this something we're considering? I mean, certainly I would value it, but I understand there is obviously we're trying to maximise usage of the car parks, and bigger spaces means less spaces, obviously. So I just wondered what thought had been given to that. And then secondly, again, I'm going to channel my inner Councillor Burrett again. The report on the parades has West Green Parade having the same number of spaces as Langley Green Parade. Now, from my memory, Langley Green Parade has quite a lot of spaces and West Green Parade has very few spaces. So I just wondered if that could be tidied up before it goes out to consultation. And some of them don't say how many sites they have as well. So it's just a bit of just in the parades, because people will care about their local parade and will go, well, if they've not got that right, what else haven't they got right? So apologies for being Councillor Burrett again.
No, thank you, Councillor, for raising. I'll make sure that that's corrected. On the size of spaces, so the British Parking Association did an enormous survey not that long ago, and actually size of spaces was one of the single most important factors that people look for when they look at where to park. So absolutely that is being considered, and you'll find one of the reasons that Kingsgate is the primary site to park in the town centre is because the spaces are wider. As we reline car parks, consideration will be given to house those larger SUVs, which are becoming more commonplace, but also EV vehicles are also wider. Absolutely, I can give you reassurance that is considered as sites are being relined.
can that be included in the consultation then, just to reassure residents that we are considering that? Thank you very much for that answer.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Khan. Yeah, just one minor point regarding the Three Bridges playing field, which is listed in the report. When I first became a councillor, I had a number of complaints about that being a commuter car park, blocking the use by residents using the playing field there. Indeed, it was Councillor Patel who approached me about it initially when he was still a resident and not a councillor himself. And I was told that nothing could be done. And I said, well, how about signage? How about limited weight? And I was told that was not possible and couldn't be done. And the report now says that time-limited restrictions may offer a more cost-effective. I've been asking for this for some time, and then I did give up after a while because I was getting nothing back. I was wondering how it has now become cost-effective.
I can't talk to any of my predecessors, Councillor Pritchard, but it absolutely is possible. I think the single biggest barrier is the financial viability of doing so. So when we evaluated Three Bridges playing field, we estimate that it would cost the authority around £10,000 a year just to enforce in that, regardless of what the restrictions are. What I would say is the introduction of additional off-street sites generates a level of income where the council could reach a position that it attributes a budget to some of those car parks where they're unusable, but at the moment financially unviable.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for a very comprehensive report. Like Councillor Lanza said, it's very detailed. I've just got 4 main areas I just want to quickly go through, and then if you can answer them at the end, that'd be fine. Tilgate car park, some of the residents there are obviously complaining because of the charges that people are parking in front of residence areas. So when they're going out for the day, coming back, then suddenly they haven't got a place to park their car. Is that an issue that has been raised to you before, and what is the solution for that? Possibly permit parking, for example. The second issue, Goffs Park. Commuters parking there, as Councillor Lanza said again, we should be comfortable putting PCNs out, or at least warning signs saying, it's not commuter parking, etc. Just some queries about that. And I'll come back to that issue about commuter parking in a second. The old High Street area, and the back of the Broadwalk, some of the shopkeepers have mentioned that it's affecting the lack of car parking space and obviously the cost for people to just literally park and come in and pick up something. There's nowhere for people to just literally just pop in and out of a shop just to pick something up for like 30 minutes or 20 minute parking areas. There are double yellow lines around the back of the street there. However, maybe we should have like an area, because we have a load of disabled spaces along there. Maybe we should have another area there where people can at least stop, nip into the shop for 10, 20 minutes and then get back in the car and go. Because at the moment people are parking on double yellow lines, and some of the parking is atrocious around that corner when you go around there. So that's an issue there. Three Bridges and Crawley Station, a massive commuter straight connection to London and to Gatwick Airport. We understand that their commuters need somewhere to park, and unfortunately they're not making good decisions when it comes to that. Rather than punishing or penalising drivers and commuters, has the council got any options for these commuters and people at Three Bridges and Crawley Station? Possibly a park and ride from another area or something, just to help them during at least the rush hour times, so that at least we can assist them in that issue rather than just punishing them for parking. Obviously, people do need to get into central London, and Crawley's, should be supporting that kind of economic development. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. On Tilgate car park, we receive complaints from all over the borough, but if Tilgate residents are reporting that to ward members. The advice I give to residents and give to members is you must raise that with West Sussex County Council. I have no power to change restrictions on street, and as officers we have no influence over the parking controls at West Sussex. Additionally, nor does Councillor Noyce as the cabinet member. But residents themselves and the support of their ward members feeding that concern into West Sussex by the community highway scheme it is the first port of call. There are some restrictions in Tilgate, and they are on the list for the parking enforcement officers to change. But Tilgate car park has been a chargeable car park for some considerable time, so we don't think that any changes in terms of the report, the strategy will entrench those issues any further. But again, just encouraging members to make use of that community highway scheme. On Goffs Park and the commuters, while we've said in the strategy that officers will never have targets for issuing PCNs, that does not mean there won't be signage and that there won't be PCNs issued. It's just that the officers' function is to achieve compliance through education and encouragement in the first instance. If I speak frankly, the best position for the council is that people pay for their pay and display. It costs us more to enforce a PCN than it does for a resident to just comply with the parking restrictions. So that's our approach, is education and encouragement, rather than trying to PCN our way out into a compliant position, because that doesn't work in isolation. On the old High Street, again, I need to defer this back to West Sussex County Council. I don't have any control over the on-street provision anywhere within the town centre. And then Three Bridges and Crawley train station. So you've asked for us to consider not punishing or penalising and looking at a parking road. What I can say is that we know from people parking at Goffs Park and people parking at Three Bridges is that those that are using those sites for commuter parking are engaged in active travel. They are walking some considerable distance to get to those train stations in any event. What this strategy also outlines is that Orchard Street will be considered as a long stay, low cost site. That is the option for commuters, is use Orchard Street multi-storey car park for that purpose. It is a very large car park. It can absolutely absorb that level of usage without impacting on people's use of our parks and open spaces, which is what those car parks are designed to do. So it's not punishing or penalising, it's just encouraging them to walk in the other direction and then make their journey onto the train station.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you.
All committee members have had the opportunity to speak. Councillor Jaggard, you're attending the meeting for this report. Would you like to speak?
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak on this. It's a very, very thorough report, which I have read all the way and everything, every detail. And it's really good to hear from Councillor Jones that no neighbourhood parade is being considered for charging, because they are so important for our neighbourhoods. I have got quite a lot of different random points I'd like to make. The first one is about the Horth. Now, I've worked at the Horth as a chaperone, and I know that performers, crew, the lighting people, the microphone people, the actors are often there for hours before the actual performance, and sometimes there are two performances, a matinee and an evening performance. I know there is a small amount of parking around the back, but I would be interested in your, what you think about having some sort of concession for those performers, because they are there we want to attract good performers, good performance, and things to us, to the Horse. So I think it's vital that we offer them some sort of concession on the parking, because they are going to be there for maybe all day. And then obviously at the end of the performance, the crew have to go in and take down all the scenery and all that kind of gubbins, and it takes hours. And on that, a little typo, we're talking about Councillor Barrett and things, page 94, it talks about the theatre in East Grinstead. The theatre in East Grinstead is Chequers Mead. I've not heard of the Hawthorns. And opposite Chequers Mead, which is right in the centre of East Grinstead, there is a pay and display car park. It's quite a large pay and display car park because it is part of the town centre, but they don't charge 24 hours a day. They only charge, I think it's now 8 o'clock. It was only 6 p.m. in the evening, and it was free after that. And I wondered whether that needs to be changed on the report, because it's an error. Going to Goffs Park, and I absolutely appreciate that commuters are using the Goffs Park car park down at the bottom there, but at the same time it is, a neighbourhood park, and there's the train thing, there's the pitch and park, I presume is still going, and we want to encourage people out into our parks. So I wondered, whether the first hour could be free to encourage people to use the park for leisure facilities rather than charging them a whopping £3 straight away. And I don't want residents to be impacted by such a huge charge on that car park. The other thing I was going to ask about is on page 38 of the report. It says there's not EV charging points in the town hall car park due to the fire risk, and I was a bit concerned about that, because we were told ages and ages ago that putting more electric vehicle charging points in the town hall car park wasn't a problem, and it was safe and it had all been checked out. So in this report it says it's not safe, which is very concerning. And my last point is going on what from Councillor London said about the different parades haven't been mentioned. It says on page 28 that Pound Hill Parade, is that the Pound Hill Parade in Worth Park Road, that one near the doctor's surgery that I go to, or is it Peterhouse Parade, because that one's not mentioned at all. So that was my lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jaggard. On the Horth, in the report we allude to what we call validation agreements. So similar to how we operate at the town hall for some of our guests, where we're able to exempt vehicles. Conversations will be had with the Horth during the consultation period about how that will work. So essentially they will have autonomy over being able to exempt a certain number of vehicles. So things, exactly the type of scenario that you're talking about has been considered as part of that. On the typo, I will have that amended. On Goffs Park, that will come out in the consultation. When we've looked at the financial viability of those sites, it's important to note that when we talk about the parks, the income is going to be generated into the park, into the maintenance of that car park, into that facility, but it will form part of the public consultation. So residents will have the ability to feed back any concerns they have about where the pricing sits. But all of the calculations have been made on that £3 tariff. On town hall car park, so. EVs, members may have seen the fire at Luton Airport. I think it was about a year ago. Now the reason that fire was so severe is because there were EV vehicles involved. So EV vehicles are not any more likely to combust than petrol or diesel, but how they burn is exceptionally different. And actually the town hall car park, just because of its design and access, is really difficult to firefight. So the decision in this report is that we have other sites that are far easier, far safer to firefight, and therefore we won't look at town hall for that reason, so that if there is a fire that it relates to EVs. If you look at Kingsgate, for example, it's open on almost 4 sides, and therefore it is very easy for the fire service to firefight that, whereas the town hall, because of its kind of twists and turns throughout and difficult access, it becomes quite unsafe. And then should an EV vehicle catch a light, that fire becomes even more difficult to firefight. And then, sorry, the last point about your parades is the Worth at Pound Hill.
Okay, can I just say, how many have all the EV charging points in the town hall then been disconnected and they're no longer in use?
Yeah, they actually were disconnected some time ago, and it wasn't. It was an issue with the operator that provided them in the first place. So for fleet vehicles, we've been using alternative sites, and then for public, we have the Connected Curb project with West Sussex, which has installed some on the street across the borough, and some car parks. So Broadfield Barton, for example, now has an EV charging point.
Chair, can I ask, are we still on agenda item 5? Yeah, okay. Just in case I...
Yeah, we have crossed over. We are sort of crossing over into both car parking reports, but yeah, we still actually are considering the first one.
There's no criticism, but I don't want to miss my opportunity to speak, so thank you.
Yeah, we have sort of crossed over. There has been a sort of a merge of discussions into both, but we are still considering the strategy.
Okay, thank you.
But yeah, there has been a slight merge.
That's all right.
So I'd like to thank the officers for an interesting report. I move that the Commission notes the report and request the views expressed during the debate are fed back to the Cabinet through the Commission's comment sheet. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Pritchard. Thank you. We will now consider the off-street parking places and this report, also from Councillor Jones, Chris and Dan. Councillor Jones, can you please introduce the report? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This second item applies the strategy in practice, and we get into some of the more granular detail. It presents phase 1 of our off-street parking analysis, identifying 3 locations proposed for tariff introduction and 1 site where we propose a significant operational shift. The sites are the Goffs Park Lower Car Park, the Hall Theatre Car Park, K2 Crawley Leisure Centre Car Park, and the optimisation of the Orchard Street multi-storey car park. Beginning with the Orchard Street multi-storey, Orchard Street is the largest multi-storey that the council has in its estate, with 448 bays, but weekday occupancy remains around 50%. So in some respects, it's no longer serving its strategic purpose. Now, we're proposing to reposition it as a low-cost, long-stay site, supporting town centre workers, visitors and local residents. And the plan changes for that include rebranding the site as the High Street Car Park, introducing worker and residential permit schemes, and trialling secure cycle storage and car club infrastructure there. This will align the site with the successful approach that's been taken at the Kingsgate Car Park, offering a further competitive parking offer which improves the town centre balance and enhances the site's role in supporting access to employment services and visits to the historic Crawley High Street. Goffs Park Lower Car Park, originally intended for park users, this 46 space car park is now dominated by commuters. It's full most days, but anyone who's been down there will attest turnover is low. You can wander through the park itself at times when it is deserted, Madam Chair, and still find the car park jam-packed. There is no mystery to this. These are commuters, and they need to pay for their parking at an appropriate town centre location or catch the bus like the rest of us. A nominal short stay charge is proposed to restore its leisure focus and improve availability for families and casual users. It's estimated this will achieve a modest surplus income and will mean this site can be accessed by those wishing to visit Goffs Park. And in a similar arrangement with Tilgate Park, that means that more money can be invested in the park itself, which I think is the right thing to do. We're also exploring a 26-space extension at Goffs Park, subject to an assessment of the green space impact and feedback from the community. Moving to the Horth Theatre car park, the Horth currently offers around 250 unregulated bays and serves over 350 public events a year, including theatre performances, local festivals and community use. Now, we're proposing to introduce a modest tariff tied to usage patterns, ensuring that prices are comparably favourable with locations of other theatres in the local area. We're very aware of the Horth civic role, and as part of the consultation, we'll explore how the site supports access for all the education and community programmes, and how infrastructure upgrades such as the formalisation of bays, particularly blue badge bays, can be funded through this change. Possibly addressing one of the largest changes will be the K2 Crawley car park. K2 is the most complex site in the estate, without a doubt. It serves a major leisure facility, schools, regular competition events, but again it is used as a free overspill car park for other activities that are entirely unconnected to the leisure centre or the activities that are going on within it. And has been alluded to earlier, Madam Chair, this is now frequently leading to problems, particularly at weekends. The car park's frequently over capacity, and the current lack of regulation is leading to dangerous parking, on-site queuing and disruption to Metrobus services, because it can get so bad that the bus company makes a judgment that the bus can't stop there, which is a problem. Now, consultation will shape the final proposals here. This may include a traffic regulation order to improve enforcement and tackle unsafe parking. It also might involve repurposing Tilgate Lane surface car parks to act as overflow parking during peak times and major events. Now, K2 needs a bespoke solution. We're not ruling things out at the moment. Some form of validation is certainly, to my mind, a possibility. But we're taking the time to get this right. And we're starting with public input and careful partnership working with key stakeholders. So this phase one analysis is a direct application of the strategy, and it's taking forward the proposals where we believe the case is the strongest, and continuing to refine and consult where it's more complex. Again, the analysis is evidence-led, very community-aware, and tailored to each location. These are not blanket changes. I want to stress that. They're going to be targeted, measured, and appropriate as much as we can achieve that. Now, I anticipate before anyone asks that during this time of transition, any changes will not be universally popular, but sometimes we have to grasp the nettle and take difficult decisions that we know people may be unhappy with in the short term, but will improve things in the longer term for everyone. So I'm happy to take questions and provide any further detail that the committee might need, but I think we've covered quite a lot of the specific detail already, so hopefully that's been answered. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just a couple of points. K2. I have been on a bus a number of times. I do not drive a car, so I have no direct interest in this, but I've had bus journeys disrupted due to parking at the K2 several times when I've been going to Tilgate Park. I have a separate issue with Metrobus not going into Tilgate Park anymore, but several times I've experienced that problem, and we should be promoting public transport as the primary option to get to K2. So I think introducing some modest parking charges into K2 might provide the impetus for that switch to public transport to get there, because it is very well served by the number 2 bus. So I think that will be helpful. Regarding the Horth Theatre, I was born and brought up in Kent, but I'm fairly familiar with some of the theatres in Sussex as well. But I can't think of any other theatre off the top of my head that isn't either in a town or city centre where you have to pay for parking to go to them. I can't think of any theatre in either Kent or Sussex that has free parking like the Horth currently does. So I don't think we're putting ourselves outside the norm. I think we're bringing ourselves into the norm. And if someone is budgeting for a night at the theatre, it is a luxury activity, and therefore they can budget a couple of quid to park the car there. Again, with the Horth, the public transport isn't brilliant because it doesn't go directly to it, but there is public transport that you can use to go to that theatre as well. I'll declare an interest. I am on Crawley Active Travel, just so that's not missed. But I think those points we should be promoting active travel and public transport as alternatives to driving to these locations.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just on a point Councillor Pritchard made, and we've never sought to make access to the Horth universally a luxury activity, have we? No, let's just step away from that description if we could. It's very important to subsidise the arts. I'm not saying subsidise parking, but the arts to survive have to be subsidised. Given the amount of debate we're having on this, and I think the amount of public interest it's going to generate, Chair, I just wonder if we could take an early view that we'd like this to come back to the OSC after the public consultation.
Yep. I think I can confirm that it will come back to this committee after the consultation is concluded anyway. I certainly take the point, if I can answer these points, Madam Chair, that it would be good to encourage behaviour change and promoting public transport. I look at K2 and I have been told by one or two residents in the past that they feel that the number 2 route is a little circuitous to K2, which is which I think is a valid comment, although it's difficult to know without fundamentally asking Metrobus to totally rearrange all their routes how we could address that. But although K2 is an excellent facility, I think we probably do have a challenge around public transport in general that maybe we think we need to give more thought. But I agree, if we can encourage that sort of fundamental behaviour change, that would be very valuable. And I absolutely agree. I mean, I think a reasonable charge at the theatre is something that is a proportionate response to what's going on. We do have evidence that the Horth car park has been used by non-theatre users for non-theatre use throughout the day. I think that's fair to say. I'm not making anything up here. Something which could regulate use so that it is actually being used for what is intended for probably would be welcome. Certainly at some times during the day.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question on the Goffs Park parking consideration. I understand the need to deal with commuter issues, as I've said before, and possibly even cover operating costs for the car park itself, as long as those charges and revenue are directly benefiting the park users themselves, which is fair enough. I also understand the restriction hours you put in, 0 to 4 hours, £3. But what I don't understand is from 4 to 12 hours, a £9 tariff. As a commuter, I would pay £9 to park there to go on a train, because Three Bridges charge £8.50. So is that deterring the commuters? I don't think so. Charging them, possibly, yeah. So they should pay for it. It shouldn't be free parking for them. But if you're trying to resolve the issue of commuters not using the car park, then I don't think that fee's a deterrent, to be fair. And to be honest with you, I'd prefer to see a 0 to 2 hours free parking for people to benefit from Goss Park, and anything above 2 hours to 4 hours, possibly a charge for it. That's just my opinion on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. The rationale for the £9, and remember we are at the same time simultaneously launching a rebrand of Orchard Street multi-storey car park as long stay. So we will be fiercely encouraging people to move. It won't stop it completely. You're right. There are train station car parks nearby. I think there's some psychology around privately managed car parks and people's want to use those versus council car parks, which they see as organisations they feel they can trust a little bit more. So like I said, we will, of the commuter sites that we have in the town, we will be heavily encouraging them to make use of Orchard Street, which has been repurposed for them to use. So I think that's the most important kind of element on that. On the 0 to 2 hours free parking, it's essentially, if we did that, it becomes unviable to introduce the parking controls at all. It will cost us a considerable amount of money to have that free parking in place. The council's not in a position to do that currently. Unfortunately, that free parking offer doesn't form part of the recommendations that officers are making.
It's a shame, obviously, that there's a cost associated with putting 0 to 2 hours for free. I understand that. The Orchard Street car park that you're working on, I think what would be quite useful for big signs to be put near the train stations themselves, so that people know there's an option, especially people who are visiting the town or people who are just using the stations themselves. They might not know where another car park is or overflow car park is. So that might help. Just a suggestion on that.
I think it's worth stressing, thank you, Chair, that the proposals at Goffs Park would only be putting on a par with Tilgate Park. So we're not saying we're introducing some premium fee that if you didn't go to Tilgate Park you wouldn't expect to pay. And in some respects there's some consistency there, if nothing else. I think the other thing where I think possibly the impact on Goffs Park will be less is because Goffs Park's so central, my perception is a lot of the users tend to walk there because it's near the neighbourhood where they live. I think there's a very specific locality to a lot of the users, and which is slightly different, the different dynamic to Tilgate Park. In terms of the question, actually, Madam Chair, about commuters and actually if it's more worth their while using the railway station car parks, well, for some of the commuters who are travelling by train, that's precisely where they should be going anyway, to my mind. So they shouldn't be blocking up our parks. I think that's... I make no apologies if that disrupts there or makes that a more attractive option for them.
Could I come back on that? That's okay. Councillor Jones, the issue is when commuters go into Three Bridges or Crawley Station, the car parks are full. So they would go somewhere closer. That's probably why.
Well, Chair, Orchard Street car park isn't full, so they've got plenty of options. I've just had it drawn to my attention, Madam Chair, that the fee at Goffs Park will be £2.50. Oh, Orchard Street, sorry, will be £2.50, which is more reasonable. Sorry.
I mean, like, what I will say, obviously, in an ideal world, we wouldn't have to introduce these charges. But so first of all, I would like to comment on the Horth Theatre one. I feel like the Horth Theatre is a unique theatre because it has a massive car park with it. It's one of the only theatres in this local area or surrounding area which actually does have a surrounding car park, because if you go to most of the West End theatres in London, which I'm quite familiar with, none of them have any car parking whatsoever. So I'm less sympathetic with this charge, considering I would rather charge people for parking when it comes to doing these activities rather than introducing charges on like certain parades where like, obviously people need to go to use doctor surgeries or to go for their local shopping. So I definitely think this charge makes more sense than other charges that could have been proposed. So yeah, that's all I want to say.
I think they were observations, and I think I agree with them. I think discussing what we would do in an ideal world is an entirely different conversation. But we're not embarking on any of this lightly. We've been fortunate as a council that up till now that we could choose not to do some of these things, but we're in a position now where we have to look at our resources and apply it in a fair way, but also in a way that actually possibly is more similar to what happens elsewhere, just because we have to be conscious of I maintain with this, actually, Chair, throughout, that actually the golden thread, I go back to the golden thread, which is we know with some of these car parks, well, all of these car parks, there are issues where the parking is being used in a way we do not, it was not provided for. And so we're hoping very much, well, not hoping, it's our expectation that these measures will actually address that, and it can be used by the people who want to use it for the purpose that it was intended.
Thank you. And thank you for this detailed report. I've got a few comments on all of them, really. I'll start with Goss Park. As I said, I live nearby and feel I know the usage of that park quite well. I do support the introduction of the parking charges, mainly because, which might not make me popular with my neighbours, which, you know, the current usage of that car park is not correct, and we need to do something about it. What I would say, and I also welcome the fact that there's talk about looking at CPZs, because I live on a road where there are no parking restrictions, and there's a number of roads in the immediate adjacency to that car park where I think people might try and park to avoid paying the charge. What I'm concerned with, but there's no real way until we bite the bullet and find out, is I think a large number of actual park users will avoid paying the charge by going and using the free car park at what you've termed the upper Goffs Park car park. For a large part of the park services, that is not a dissimilar walk into the park for things such as the golf and indeed the toilets are closer to the upper car park. That's not to say that there's not, you know, I would welcome its success, because, you know, there are certain bits of the park that definitely need investment and we need to justify that investment. So I would see it as a success. Coming on to the other point on it, I understand that you might want to look at an extension to the car park, but I hope that before we embark on any of that, we see how successful the car park charges are, because we're only getting half use out of it. Obviously, it wouldn't make sense to then extend the car park if we're not getting the usage out of it. And I also wonder whether we will look at charging for the upper car park as well, you know, if we think we need to, but that's a matter for another time. Just coming on to the last point, there was some discussion on around parking for Crawley railway station. Obviously, in the fullness of time, the existing official railway car park will probably be built over if water neutrality isn't an option. Has some thought, and this is a question probably more for the leader than for the officer, has some thought been given to the fact that, and I don't know if this is, we are acquiring a site in the vicinity of Crawley Station, I can't remember if it's in Part A or Part B, that could be used as a car park in part. I don't know whether I can say the name of it because I don't know if we've acquired it yet. Sorry, you can come back to me another time because that's probably
I'm afraid I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah,
Councillor
okay.
Dunn.
I haven't finished it. I'll carry on the other ones. So on to the Horth. I think it's a perfectly reasonable suggestion. What I was slightly confused by was in the report, it then talked about giving rebates to ticket owners or ticket purchasers, which in my mind would entirely invalidate the entire purpose, because I would have thought the vast majority of users are people who have paid for a ticket to the theatre. So if we start not charging them, then I think our attempt to create any revenue out of this scheme will fall flat very quickly. So I was slightly surprised that was considered in the report. Otherwise, I think it's perfectly valid to put parking charges in there. And a point I made earlier, both for Goss Park and for the Hawth, and I'll make it again for Tilgate, there's no mention in the report of how we're going to encourage local active travel, because there's no provision of suitable cycle parking in these. So in every case, I'd like to see more consideration made of supporting local active travel. Finally, on to K2. Again, I agree, it's overused and can be a problem for lots of people at the time. It is highlighted in the report, I want to emphasise this though, that for a lot of gyms, say a gym in the town centre, free parking is provided as part of your package of membership, and K2's financial viability is very much dependent on the success of the gym. So I welcome the fact that the report talks about having to look into it further, getting into contact with the provider of the services to make sure that we don't, it might very much be that we increase parking charges but lose the amount gained by the Freedom Leisure having to give us less money for their right to operate K2, and in effect we've cost ourselves money by doing it. So I'm glad that we're not definitely going to do that yet, but we do need to do something to increase the suitability of that car park. And obviously you need to then consider the impact of using the Tilgate overflow car parks, because they obviously already have a use currently in the overflow for Tilgate Park, which sometimes gets full as a car park. So if we do use those car parks for K2 overflow, then Tilgate is going to have to disperse somewhere, as mentioned by one of the councillors earlier. So we need to look at CPZ possible review again in Tilgate areas if people in Tilgate can't go anywhere, although obviously Fisherman's car park might be an option for them. That's it.
I'll cover some of these and then if I've missed any, I'm happy for Dan to. I'll address Goffs Park. I mean, most of the surrounding area around Goffs Park is covered in West Green, and Southgate is covered by the CPZ. And of course, any CPZ extension would be West Sussex County Council. Now, I take on board there are a couple of roads that arguably aren't covered, but but as one of them is as one or two of them are mostly comprised of driveways, it'd be foolish for most motorists to try and park over those, I would suggest. And the other one that I can think of, there are allocated spaces down that road by house number. So again, I'm happy to take that offline with Councillor Lunnon, but it's not his road I'm thinking of. In terms of the upper car park at Goss Park, take that on board. We do think that that's much less enticing for non-park users, given the location and its relative distance from the town centre and popular commuting points. I think it's fair to say that we will look at the experience of what happens at the lower car park, and it will be reviewed in terms of capacity. However, I would say that for the long-term future, we probably do need some kind of extension at Goffs Park, just because we will need a larger car park for the scale of the ambition we have for some of the things that could go in there and how it could be improved. In terms of active travel support, absolutely, we're taking that seriously, and a couple of examples would be secure cycle parking trials at Kingsgate and Orchard Street, and new car club bays to reduce reliance on private vehicles. There's also attempt to also ensure that in terms of sustainability, that we'll have sort of pay by phone solutions borough-wide to reduce paper waste. But importantly, just to stress, we know that there are some people who are digitally excluded, and we're not going to just, like some private parking car park companies I could mention in Crawley, we're not going to throw everyone who doesn't know how to use the technology under the wheels of the appropriate vehicle. We will we will ensure that alternative payment methods will always be retained. I think, and obviously you did mention, yes, clearly with two of these locations at least, we've got to work closely in partnership with our companies that help manage them. So, and that we fully will take that into account. Thank you. Was there anything I missed? I'll probably.
Yeah, just on the language with the Hawth and K2 Crawley is. It will use phrases like considered because we have to be really careful in terms of the disruption of those as civil or arts and culture or health and wellbeing sites. I think you're right to point out the gym the gym stuff in the town centre. What I would say is we have a commercial agreement with a gym in the town centre, so they pay for their customers' parking, and they pay the council for those free spaces. And the most likely consideration for K2 is that there is a validation agreement. We take the responsibility of the promotion of health and wellbeing really seriously, and the car park plays a massive role in that. None of the proposals are designed to reduce the access to health and wellbeing facilities.
Quick run through all the different sites. I think it's really good. Alter Street's actually my favourite car park, and actually I quite liked what you said, Dan. I feel better going into public car parks, because private car parks, you don't know how they're going to be enforced, and I think that's always a bit of a concern for people. I have to say though, although it's my favourite car park, the environment of Alter Street does leave something to be desired. It's I don't know if the PCSO is an issue there. And I know, actually, Councillor Crowe had an interesting experience there at the Dorset and West Green by-election last year when he encountered some people who shouldn't have been in there. But there is a particular issue at Alter Street, which I think if we're going to attract people to there, we will have to deal with. In terms of Heath, I think I would agree that there is probably some space there, although I assume that I'd imagine it's people from Commonwealth Drive who probably use the Heath and park down there, and I don't know what's it like in the daytime, but it's something. It's a balance between getting the people in, but if there's parking to be had there, have some kind of, I don't know, cheap residence parking or something, or to consider. The other thing in terms of the Heath I was thinking about is that obviously you've got Friends of Heath there, whether there could be some kind of discount for either, I think probably Crawley residents. If you had a discount for Crawley residents, it would probably go against their active travel plans if we had that, but perhaps some kind of incentive for people who are regular users of the Heath to have some kind of season ticket price. And this is Tilgate £1.40 an hour up to, or is it £1.40, £1.50 an hour? Right, so that answers that question about Goffs Park. It does say in the Goffs Park, where is it? Sorry, I've lost it again. In the Goffs Park, it says 3 hours. In the body report, it says 3 hours, but it says on the tables 4 hours in terms of income. On page 87, third paragraph down, £3 for up to 3 hours been applied. The volume, is that right? Yes. While in the actual table it says 0 to 4 hours, just a little thing. That's my channeling my inner Council of London. So, and in terms of K2, yeah, I think we'll probably have to resort to the overspill car park, but I'd imagine there'd be quite a lot of capital work there, which would be able to be taken from some other budget. The only problem is I don't know what the situation is on match days at Crawley Town, which must exacerbate the problem. But I imagine the only danger there is that it spreads into other neighbourhoods. I think both Southgate and Woolfield residents have been pretty patient when it comes to parking off street, and they don't seem to have a problem there. But that's the only slight problem there. And in terms of your point about the buses, there is, I suppose, the obvious one would be some kind of 10A, bearing in mind the amount of buses which go up to Woolfield, but tuck in and come out again. But I can't see that ever happening. But on the whole, I think it needs to be done, doesn't it? A lot of this stuff. So, but it's getting that balance between all those different priorities, and I think the public consultation will be key. And I think it comes back to here, and that whatever people say in the public consultation, we have to due conciseness, and if people residents don't like particular things, just have to take that into consideration when we make our final decision. You know my idea of a 10A.
All right.
Chair, I think Dan's probably got much closer to a lot of the detail. All I would say about issues at Orchard Street, which I'm told we are fully aware of, is that we have a public space protection order in place for all our 3 multi-stories because we wanted to have it at our disposal should we experience issues anywhere. And I will reiterate what I've said before, which is if you don't have a car and you're not parking in the multi-story, you have no business being there. And I would very much hope that that's enforced and will be enforced. And I'm sure Dan can probably say a bit more about that.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, the PSPO has been an invaluable tool at dealing with those issues in Orchard Street, but for no particularly obvious reason on the surface, Orchard Street is chosen by some of our drug-dependent residents and some of our rough sleeping residents as a place to bed down or spend their days. When I look at it with my crime prevention head on, when we talk about the occupancy rate at Orchard Street multi-storey, we're talking about 25% being season tickets, and that's generally residents that will use their car 2 or 3 times a week. The other 25% is casual, so people that are using it intermittently. One of the biggest issues with that site is because nobody's in it. So if nobody is in it going in and out, you have no natural surveillance of that site and no kind of capable guardianship. The other key issue here is that the proposed removal of some of the AMPR will mean that enforcement officers will be present in that location far more often. And again, bringing that ownership. We have been trialling the civil enforcement officers in parking, enforcing the first stage of the PSPO, which is the lawful instruction to leave. And actually, we've seen great success of that at Kingsgate, Town Hall Car Park, and Orchard Street. But Orchard Street is persistent because it's just empty of people constantly. And these proposals seek to drive footfall up, and will help to deal with that deal with that issue. On K2 Crawley, yes, the overflows would require capital investment, subject to members' decisions at Cabinet tomorrow. We won't know what those decisions are, but they would need full resurfacing. On match days, yes, I'm not a football fan at all, but what I do know is that particularly Brighton matches are the worst, and that is because people drive from Brighton to Crawley. So I think it's really key to point out that most of the people that are parking really poorly in relation to Crawley Football Club are not Crawley residents. They're people travelling from further afield. The bus is another key thing. The bus route is so unreliable because it gets cancelled or diverted so frequently. And officers that have done some research at K2 Crawley are saying that 17 people a month are collected from the bus stop at K2. That's how people are not using active travel to get to the gym because it is so unreliable. And as Councillor Pritchard also pointed out, it disrupts routes to other parts of the borough, like Tilgate Park as well.
Okay. Oh, no, it's on. Thank you. In that case, I would like to thank the officers for an interesting report. I move that the Commission notes the report and requests that views expressed during the debate are fed back to the Cabinet through the Commission's comment sheet. Do we have a seconder? Kieran Khan. So is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Right, we're coming up to the we've got 5 minutes to do everything else. So we've got no more reports. It's just a forthcoming discussion list. If Heather would like to read it out.
Lovely. Thank you, Chair. So I'm going to go through this very quickly. So this meeting, we're going to look ahead to the start of June. As you may be aware, there is a Cabinet meeting now taking place on the 4th of June. We don't usually have a Cabinet at the beginning of June. It's usually just the first OSC meeting, and then the Cabinet is then the later June meeting. But we do have a early June Cabinet, and as a result, there are meetings which are going to be potentially that the Commission could potentially refer. This will be the Commission's first meeting of the municipal year, but it would be beneficial to know in advance if there's any potential referrals that you want to look at. I'd like to quickly remind members of the Commission of the scrutiny training and criteria to address when you make referrals. So, would the OSC add value? Can the OSC influence and add to the debate? Does the report's proposals go against existing policy? Where else might the report be considered? Is the referral a good use of officer and councillor resources? And would an informal discussion with the report author resolve any issues or queries? So currently, and obviously I'm aware June is quite a month or so away, there are currently 5 reports heading to the Cabinet on the 4th of June, and they are all housing reports again. And we may also have the annual staff welfare report, which the Commission has had for the last several years, but this will be dependent on timing and how many reports you refer tonight. So one report has already been referred, which is the Crawley Homes domestic abuse policy, and the other reports are scheduled on the agenda: Crawley Homes asset strategy, Crawley Homes decarbonisation policy, Crawley Homes mutual exchange policy, and Crawley Homes information management policy. So do you wish to refer any of those reports, please? And can you let me know? Let me know why, please. And not just because you're on scrutiny.
I think the mutual exchange policy, definitely, because I think it's an interest to housing policy, and it links into other bits and pieces we do, and I think they probably should be formalised as well.
If I could make a general point, I think what I've learned tonight personally is the quality of the reports that's been written is of a very high standard. And it's not to say I wouldn't want to look at other reports, but I think less might be more in this instance. So to have the opportunity to deep dive on a smaller number may be of more value.
Okay, so you will currently have, you've got domestic abuse policy, you've got mutual exchange policy. You could then also have, you would have the staff welfare report, which you would usually have at the beginning, the early June, and you've had that for several years. So as it's an annual report, you would have that anyway. So that could get scheduled like it normally would.
Can I just ask about what does the asset strategy policy entail?
Apart from the fact, unfortunately, it doesn't actually go into great detail on the FDN. I'm guessing it just provides further details to comply with legislation regarding all the assets under Crawley Homes, currently detailed under Crawley Homes, and to comply with the current legislation and guidance.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I kind of kind of agree with what Councillor Russell said. Less is more, and I'd add as well, of course, that we will be, I expect, having on the agenda a cabinet member interaction session as well, to replace the one that we didn't have this evening. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I could certainly.
So that's adding to the agenda as well. Yeah. So I wouldn't personally say.
Yeah, I would be extending the invite back to Councillor Noyce. Obviously, I will need to gain a response first, but yes, the invite would go back out to Councillor Noyce. You'll have staff welfare, the annual staff welfare report. You'll have Crawley Homes domestic abuse policy, Crawley Homes mutual exchange policy, and the invite will go back out for a cabinet member discussion. Obviously, we'll need a response, but the invite would go for Councillor Noyce, subject to confirmation.
Councillor Nick, if you wanted the strategy instead of the mutual one, then that's an option possibly.
Just talking to my colleague to my right, I would agree.
There's no further supplementary agenda items. With business of the Overall Scrutiny Commission of the 22nd of April concluded, the meeting is now closed at 9:33. So that's not too bad, is it? Right, thank you.